the non-record mode or whatever it is. As you can see, I'm not really computer savvy, so I don't know the computer lingo. So I'm leaving it up to you to figure out what it is you need to do. And that is very quick and to the point. Welcome again. As you know, I'm still Sharon Salam, and I'm going to introduce to you right now Mark Pessin from the Rockland County Coalition to End the New Jim Crow.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the virtual Walk for Justice 2020. My name is Mark Pessin, and I am a member of the steering committee of the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow. And we are grateful to be co-hosting this virtual Walk for Justice to Albany with Sharon Salam and the Justice for Wrongfully Incarcerated organization. We have brought a number of people connected with our organization who present our positions on the larger context in which the wrongly incarcerated have been made to suffer and ought to be made whole. First of all, we see the prisons and jails filled with people who do not belong there. Because of the fake war on drugs and the dismantling of our mental health services in the 60s and 70s, the prisons have become places we warehouse people with drug addictions or mental illness. These people are not provided the services they need to restore their health and well-being and should receive their services in the communities they live and with the support of their families. Furthermore, about 2/3 of the jails are filled with people, disproportionately oppressed groups, who are being held pre-conviction. In other words, they are innocent until proven guilty and yet remain in jail sometimes for many years and have not been convicted of anything. One remembers the plight of Khalif Browder, a young man who was incarcerated for many years, abused by prisoners and staff alike, put into solitary confinement, all because he was stealing a book bag, which it turns out he did not even do, and so was wrongfully convicted. When he went home, he was so traumatized that he committed suicide. We will now go to the speakers. After the speakers, Sharon will lead us into the second section of our activities today, and people will have a chance to ask questions and make comments. I believe you will also have the availability of the chat room to do that as well. So you can put your comments or questions in the chat room so you don't forget them. Our first speaker is Claudette Green, and she is going to tell us about the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow. Claudette is one of the founding members of the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow and a community activist. Okay, Claudette.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone.
How are you?
Okay, thank you. Like most NJAN groups, Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow started with a book, and we know what that book is. It is Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. We saw Alexander's book as a catalyst and as an igniting force, as well as an organizing tool for actions. Michelle Alexander presented overwhelming evidence that state-sanctioned racism in the form of epidemic levels of mass incarceration was destroying Black and other communities of color. The New Jim Crow refers to a criminal justice system that is racially discriminatory, arresting and convicting Black and Latino individuals at a higher rate and sentencing them longer than white individuals for comparable crimes. So it just seemed like the impetus was on us to do something, and we're all volunteers, we're all community activists, we all believe in racial and economic justice, and so our group started 8 years ago in the wake of this overwhelming evidence that we felt that we could not ignore. But most importantly, we're a coalition, which means that we work with other groups. We're anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, and many of our members belong to other organizations, and so we welcome partnerships with these allied organizations when the need arises. We believe that the fight for racial and economic justice takes many forms and requires as many activists as possible. We also believe that no one group or person should have authority over who is qualified to fight oppression. As Martin Luther King so astutely put it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So how do we win? As Miles Horton said, it's a long haul. And as F. Scott Fitzgerald also said, we're like a current, we're beating against the current of, all the bad policies that have left people in such dire situations in prisons and also in their regular lives. So we have engaged in several campaigns. One of them was the Ban the Box campaign, Ban the Box in unemployment, and that is still ongoing in Rockland County, because while many states and counties have ban the box in employment, Rockland County is a hard nut to crack. And so that fight continues. But one fight we feel very proud about is the ban the box in college admissions. And as we know, that was won a few years ago, and a member of our group was on a task force, testified, and so we're pretty happy about that. So we're the little engine that, goes up the hill, slowly but surely. We have also been very, very involved in the Hall bill, trying to get that passed. We also recently the bail reform, which unfortunately there have been rollbacks, but we're still determined to fight on that front. And so what do? We whenever we get discouraged, we really realize that there's so many others who are sharing our struggles, and we're fighting for all the Black Michaels, all the Black Ahmads, all the Black Sandras, all the Black Erics, because we know that had these people been white, they would not have been in the situation. And all the Black and brown people who are in jail, who are in solitary confinement, who are in prisons, who are in threat of COVID-19, who are undergoing all these unbearable situations. And so we thank you for what you do. We admire you for what you do, and we are there with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Claudette. Appreciate. Next
Okay, let me just say this before you start. There's a vibration that's going on, so make sure the vibration is being heard. Make sure everything is turned off. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, next we have Paul Castellero, who is the legal director of Centurion Ministries, and as such, he has freed 14 innocent men and women serving life sentences for the crimes of others, more than any other single attorney in the United States. So Paul, what do you have to say?
Well, it was 18, not 14, but anyway. Well, numbers matter sometimes. I deal with wrongful incarceration from a different perspective. I work at Centurion Ministries, now Centurion. It's a non-sectarian nonprofit organization based in Princeton, and we deal with innocent cases, claims of innocence, and we deal with almost exclusively murder cases. And over the years, we're actually the first organization founded in the United States that try to begin to deal with the problem of people being wrongly convicted, as opposed to overcharged in prison because of, in essence, like Claudette was saying, based upon discrimination and all those other issues. We're dealing with cases of people that are maintaining they were innocent and were convicted. And we deal with cases, we investigate cases. We really rarely deal with DNA cases. And if we're not adverse to dealing with a DNA case, but it's generally we go in, we get letters from all over the country. I currently have cases in Michigan, Missouri, Louisiana, New York, New Jersey. So we move around. We have a pending case in California, and people write to us and from prison, and they maintain they're innocent, and we begin an investigation. And if we think they make a colorable claim of actually being innocent, we take the case. Currently, we have, I think, 22 cases that we're actively dealing with and investigating and/or litigating. I'm currently litigating, actually in court on 7 or 8 cases right now. So it's a kind of almost invariably we're dealing with Black and brown people that have been wrongly convicted and imprisoned despite their innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long process, and it takes us years and years and years to obtain the freedom of somebody that's been wrongly convicted and are actually innocent. It always involves a field investigation, and it involves years of litigation. Currently, I have a case in Michigan that is, I think, a very compelling case. I've been handling it for 2 years. This man has been in jail for 16 years. He's had some pretty shoddy representation. And he's been making a claim that is ultimately the same claim that we're making currently. And it's taken 16 years, and he's still pushing uphill. And every one of our cases involves us pushing uphill. Especially when you don't have that, that silver bullet of DNA evidence to show that, somebody couldn't possibly have committed the crime. And it'll involve recanting witnesses. It may involve us discovering misconduct by the prosecutor. It'll involve us, finding ineffective assistance to counsel where the lawyers just didn't do their job. And it'll find just, new facts that we will uncover that shows that the person's actually innocent. The fastest I think we've ever had it, we've freed 63 people over the years. And the fastest I think we've ever had a case from the time we took it until the time we obtained the person's freedom has been about 2.5 years. And that was extraordinarily quick. And that still involved us. It was a case down in Louisiana. It involved us going, we were in the Supreme Court of Louisiana. We got sent down to the trial court. We had hearings. We won. They appealed it. We were in the intermediate appellate court. And then we were back in the Supreme Court where we ultimately won. And that was really fast, 2.5 years. It involved a field investigation where we found witnesses that the lawyer just never spoke to. We presented those witnesses and showed that, in fact, the individual we were representing couldn't possibly have committed the crime. So it's a very time-consuming process. We're dealing with a very narrow area of wrongful incarceration. We're dealing with just the area. It's as I said, it's almost exclusively. It is exclusively murder cases, and it's exclusively if people are maintaining that they were convicted despite their innocence. So,
Mark?
That's essentially it.
Mark?
Thank you, Paul. And now we have Sharon White Harrigan, who is the executive director of the Women's Community Justice Association and Beyond Rosie's 2020. It's a campaign aimed at closing the women's jail on Rikers Island, New York City. She will tell us about the plight of women in the jails, prisons, and the issues of wrongly accused women. So, Sharon?
Well, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you. I just want to highlight the women because, as many of us know, we are underrepresented, we're underacknowledged, and we're overlooked. And so, for those who don't know, there are more men in prison, but the female population is always increasing at a faster rate. And so prior to the COVID-19, the numbers were decreasing at the Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island here in New York City, but it's now back on the rise. Why? Partially because of the shelter in place, which, people's traumas are coming to the forefront. People are, going back to the substance abuse, and most importantly, it is exacerbating domestic violence. And so I just would like to just talk a minute about the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, which went into law late last year. The governor signed it into law. I had the honor of being one of the original co-leaders on the bill, co-writer of the bill. And, basically it states that it gives the judges discretion to sentence survivors whose abuse was significant in their crime to reduce their sentences, and also permit currently incarcerated survivors to apply to the courts for resentencing and earlier release. Although the survivor defendants, which they call them, they have to have, fit into some sort of criteria. And one of them, of course, being a victim of domestic violence and being sentenced under the current law, which they deem unduly harsh. Other than that, right now, there is an estimate about 360 incarcerated survivors of domestic violence that will be eligible for resentencing under the bill, and an estimated 365 women and 115 men would be eligible for alternative sentencing per year under this bill. The only problem is that we need to push this law. And reason being is because although this law exists, it has yet to really been taken seriously by the judges, by the district attorneys. And so there's one particular case, Nikki, who was sentenced, I think, to about 30 years or more. And she fell under this Domestic Violence Survivor Justice Act law. Her case through and through, the judge recognized that, this was a really harsh domestic violence case. However, didn't sentence her under the law because he felt like there was at some point where she could have safely left her situation. And so when we look at things like this, we really need the community to kind of back this up. As everyone knows, domestic violence has existed since biblical times. And so we need men and women to stand up to support this, especially men, because most domestic violence histories and situations is brought on by men. And not to say that men do not. I definitely don't want to diminish what men go through, but we know that women suffer domestic violence and intimate partner violence much more. So we just need, asking for the community, all of you, just to take notice of the different laws and efforts that are being put forth out here, because a lot of women are doing time and a lot of women are being wrongfully convicted. A lot of women are being detained, right? And they shouldn't be. And for all of us who know women are the pulse and the heart of our community and of the family. So we need everybody on board and all hands on deck. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks very much.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Very
Yeah.
good.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you.
your input.
Yes.
Okay,
Now,
finally we have Lucia Hermo, who is the Deputy Director of the Hudson Valley chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is affiliated with the ACLU. Prior to that, she was the Public Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Alabama. So Lucia?
Great. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm happy to be here. Apologies, I don't have my video on. I just have a bad internet connection, so this way hopefully y'all can hear me. But I want to talk a little bit about when we're talking about folks who are wrongfully incarcerated, how that is connected to bail and also adequate discovery. So we know a lot of times when if someone is faced with a charge, that's an intimidating and daunting thing that is happening, and unfortunately there is not always the resources to have proper representation, or public defenders are very overtaxed, and I've heard a lot of stories of public defenders who may not have enough time for all of their clients. A lot of what happens when this happens is that public defenders will sometimes push their clients to take plea bargains, because going to trial is very lengthy. Going to trial takes a lot of time, and there's just a lot that happens. Sometimes a plea bargain can seem like a better option. How this relates to bail is that if you're picked up for a crime, you didn't do it, but you can't afford bail, you can't afford to get out, and you're placed in pretrial detention before you have been proven innocent or guilty, it ups the chances that it puts the pressure on you to take a plea bargain. So if you're picked up and you don't have the money to pay your bail, you can sit in jail for days, weeks, or months. And all that time, it's going to be putting more and more pressure on you to be able to take a plea bargain, whether or not you are innocent or guilty, or whether or not you're able to be proven innocent or guilty. And so, if I was put in jail for a couple of weeks, like, people are going to lose their jobs, people are going to lose their rent, not be able to pay their rent, people are not going to be able to go home and take care of their kids. So there's a really big amount of pressure that's put on you to be able to take a plea bargain. And the same with discovery. Discovery is basically where the prosecution gives the information to the defense on exactly what evidence that they have to make a conviction. A lot of that, defense lawyer will look at it and make a recommendation on a plea bargain or not. And a couple of years ago, in the last legislative session, the legislature passed crucial and really important reforms on both bail and discovery. So in the previous system, prosecutors had 15 days to turn over all discoverable materials to the defense. And bail was eliminated cash bail was eliminated for a majority of misdemeanors and a majority of offenses. There were a good amount of felonies that were left off, but for the most part, we were seeing jails being emptied. Well, not being empty, but drastically reducing their how many folks were in jail, because we found that a majority of the people who are in jail are there pre-trial. So that's before they've been proven innocent or guilty. Unfortunately, on April 3rd, Governor Cuomo passed a budget, and the legislature passed a budget that included really harsh rollbacks to the bail reform law. And we were seeing, but after bail reform was passed, that even before the law went into effect, months before it went into effect, there was misinformation being placed around by some DAs, police officers, local folks who were going around and saying, this is going to be really dangerous, a lot of people are going to get out. They were pointing to very specific newsworthy crimes that were happening, that some of them didn't necessarily have anything to do with the bail law, but they were pointing to this to stoke up fear and to spread misinformation. So we saw a lot of pressure on the legislature, and unfortunately the legislature was not able to stand up and say, no, we're not going to roll back on bail reforms. A lot of folks in the criminal justice system, a lot of criminal justice advocates were really working hard to fight against these bail reforms. But with COVID happening, Cuomo got a lot of power in the last hour when they were rushing to pass a budget on April 3rd before going home before COVID. There's the bail reform rollbacks were pushed into the budget. So now the rollbacks expand the number of people who can be incarcerated pre-trial. It expands the charges that are bail eligible. Judges can set bail on people charged with a range of misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. New Yorkers can be incarcerated pre-trial if they're charged with a misdemeanor and rearrested for a misdemeanor, quote, involving harm to an identifiable person or property, which is very, very vague. So we're worried about that. And judges will be able to set bail when a person is arrested for a felony or when someone is seen as a persistent felony offender. And this is really worrying because, as we know, communities of color and low-income communities are are policed in a very different way than rich and white communities. That people of color are picked up for crimes, especially drug crimes, despite same rates of usage in white communities. And so some folks have some charges on their records that might not even necessarily be true. Maybe they were picked up on a bail reform before bail reform happened, and they plead guilty in order to get out of jail and go home to their communities and their families. It also allows courts to impose additional non-monetary conditions. It expands that, and it also expands electronic monitoring, which is really worrying. So I think that this is something that we have to think about, the whole criminal justice system. If you don't have access to quality representation, if you are not able to go to your community to plead your case, to fight your case from your home, there's a much more of a chance that you'll have to take a plea bargain, whether or not you are guilty or not. So this is, it was frustrating to see the bail reforms pushed back, but we're going to continue to fight to make sure that cash bail is eliminated, to make sure that people are not incarcerated pre-trial, and also to make sure that they're given all the information on their trial, that their attorneys have the information they need to plead their cases. So thank you so much.
Okay, now.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Let me just say that I'm going to turn it over to Sharon now, but I'm going to suggest that since we may not be able to see you and you're unmuted, you could put your name in the chat room and then Nate will be able to see that you want to make a comment or a question. Is that okay, Sharon?
Yeah, but that's, Okay, now let me just say, you can put your information in the chat room if you want to follow Justice for the Wrongfully Incarcerated. You can put your email address also in the chat room so that we can send you out information, because I know some of you who are here today didn't actually expect to come and get into this learning curve about other issues related to wrongful incarceration and incarceration. But one of the reasons that we're here is to help pass this new bill, and it is the Wrongful Conviction Recovery Act. In the Senate, the bill number is 2074A, and in the Assembly, the bill number is 3978A. These bills deal with people who have been wrongfully incarcerated, who are coming out of jails, whose cases have been adjudicated through the courts. That means that some judge somewhere has decided that they were convicted wrongfully, and they're going to move forward with their lives as innocent people because the court decided that they were convicted wrongfully. The bill also offers them financial compensation for the time that they've spent in jail. It offers them education, housing assistance, and it also offers a leg up to their families for the destructive element of being incarcerated for a crime you did not commit. What we're asking is that those people among you and within your various groups call your local representatives. If you go to our website, J4WI, or type in Justice for the Wrongfully Incarcerated, then you can join and call those representatives, call the people in your areas, and tell them you want this bill passed. I know many of our representatives are not in their offices during this time because of the pandemic that's going on in our communities. That means that when you call, you can get people to talk to you and hear what it is you have to say and do various things and speak to the machine without interruption. Because when they come back into office, those machines and those messages will be recorded. And when we go up and meet with them in their faces, in person, they will have a record of those calls and they will know that there are more than the people who are standing in front of them that are in support of these bills. As they said earlier, it takes time to get a bill passed and there's always a pushback on the bill. We need everyone's help. We need to go back and revisit some of the gains that we made on other bills that were passed. Bail reform is one of those issues that we need to revisit. Wrongful incarceration, recovery, compensation, we need to revisit. It's just so many out there. And we need to pool our resources and our efforts so that we can get these bills passed. These bills are not really for specific individuals. They will service everyone in this state. If you are arrested and you have no money to pay for your bail, and there is a bail way, a way for you to get out, or get low bail or no bail, we want to look at that so that wrongfully incarcerated people can be free and out of jail. One thing that most people have to remember is that when a person is arrested and they're taken to a place in New York City or other places like Rikers Island, most times you have not been accused or convicted of a crime as of yet, but you're spending your time there. Just like Mark had said, I believe that that young fellow who was incarcerated at Rikers Island, the Broder case, he got out and committed suicide. It's not a place to be while you're trying to fight for your innocence. There should be another approach. And that whole new approach should have to do with total bail, total prison reform. And part of that reform that we're going to be pushing for and that we are pushing for is the passage of this bill. And the bill, once again, the number is 2074A in the Senate and 3978A in the Assembly is the same as bill. So if you read one bill, the wording in the other bill is exactly the same, but we need it passed. We need your help to get it done. And we need to work together collectively so that we can get all types of things done within the prison industrial complex. Now, let me just say, we're going to be taking some questions in a minute. And tomorrow we're going to have Tanya Marquez joining us. And that's going to be a very powerful conversation as well. So join us and stay on board. Many of us here in New York State are locked down. So that means we have a lot of free time to make calls so that you can tell your representatives, the ones who are sponsoring the bill right now. This bill is in the Judiciary Committee. You can call all of these people and tell them to pass this bill. You want it signed. And if you run out of people to call, there's one individual that you can call right now. He's doing a lot of work in terms of the pandemic, and that's Governor Cuomo. Tell him also, pass this bill, sign this bill, you want it done. If we put enough pressure on them and let them know that there's enough of us who want this bill passed, it can happen. Now, I do see that there are, I hope it's 3 people in the chat room. If you raise your hand, if you have a question, anybody have any questions? No questions?
Ms. Salam, there are 2 questions for Mr. Castellero. I'm sorry, I'm saying
Okay.
that the wrong way.
All right. There are 2 questions.
Can you see them in the chat?
Not really. Can you read them for me? I can't see them.
Mr. Castellero illustrate for us the importance of the preponderance of evidence.
That's not a good mic. We could not hear you.
Okay, the question is, can I illustrate the importance of the preponderance of evidence component of the bill? Do you hear me on that?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, why doesn't Centurion work with DNA cases? Let me just answer the second question first. We work with DNA cases, but we actually, I think, do the harder cases where there is no DNA. We do a lot of that work, and we reinvestigate cases from top to bottom. You know, we'll take a case and go through every witness, every potential witness, look for new witnesses. In cases there is no DNA, and those are just a bit harder in terms of being able to overturn them, because you don't have the so-called silver bullet. But I hope I didn't leave the wrong impression that if there's DNA evidence available in the case, we'd be more than happy to deal with it and take it and do DNA testing. And we have done DNA testing in a number of cases. We just, like the Innocence Project, is their basic theory was, in the cases that they were handling, they're beginning to come off that, was that there had to be a DNA component in the case before they would take it. And they still kind of stick to that, but they're beginning to kind of come off it, only because those types of cases are drying up because DNA has become very prominent from the beginning of the case now. Back in the day, there would be no, a person would go to trial and get convicted, and there will have been no DNA testing done. And now they go back and they look at the evidence and start doing DNA testing. And so, I mean, that's how a lot of those cases came about. But now prosecutors and defense lawyers are doing DNA testing right from the beginning of a case. And a lot of times a person will have been wrongfully convicted and they'll have been DNA testing. And so you then get to you have to reinvestigate the case. And so you have to look for something other than DNA. I mean, we've done cases based on, prosecutorial misconduct. It's been talked about the discovery bill, where there'll be suppression of exculpatory evidence. That's evidence that would indicate the person's innocent, intending to indicate that they're innocent. And we'll do, litigation on that they suppressed evidence, and bad lawyering and bad science. Sometimes I had a case in New Jersey where they were using hypnotically enhanced testimony, and we were able to, show that was, unscientifically based and shouldn't be used. In regards to the first question, preponderance of the evidence, currently, when a person gets out of jail today, a judge has declared their conviction invalid, and the case has been dismissed. In order for a person in New York State to get any kind of compensation, they have to sue under there's a wrongful imprisonment or wrongful conviction statute in New York State, and they have to sue. They have to institute a lawsuit. They have a lawyer to do it, and they have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that they were innocent in order to get compensation. So what happens in those kinds of lawsuits is essentially your conviction's overturned because a court essentially has said that courts never say you're innocent, okay? But they'll essentially say that there's no real case against you, based upon whatever the basis for overturning. And then the person then sues. And when the person sues, invariably, the first reaction to the lawsuit is that, well, you really are guilty. And there was enough evidence to indicate that you were guilty. And they'll use any kind of evidence, it generally be the most dominant piece of evidence they had at the criminal trial that resulted in your conviction. And they'll go back to that. And the effect of it is that the person basically has to relive the entire trauma that they've suffered. I had a case where a woman got for 17 years, and then we had to institute a lawsuit for her wrongful conviction in order to get compensation for her. And the initial response is that they were guilty, and that they can't prove that they were innocent by clear and convincing evidence. Clear and convincing evidence. When you change the standard of proof, you'll change it by changing it to preponderance of the evidences. That means that the preponderance of the evidence is basically a simple majority of the evidence. It is the easiest way of understanding it. If it's 50-50, it has to be 50.1, and that's preponderance of the evidence. It's and clear and convincing evidence is really kind of ill-defined, but it's less than reasonable doubt, beyond the reasonable doubt, and it's more than the preponderance of the evidence. And so it's generally credible and colorable claim of innocence. And so you have to have whatever a credible and colorable claim may mean. And so if you lower the standard of proof, it would make it easier for a person who's been wrongly convicted and exonerated to prove the key element of what entitles you to compensation is that you were incarcerated and you were in fact innocent. And the way you prove you're innocent is by the standard of proof. And so you were in fact wrongly convicted and imprisoned, and you were innocent, and you have to prove that innocent component by by the preponderance of the evidence as opposed to clearing, convincing, or beyond a reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. And it just makes the proof part of it easier. And it would entitle more people, I would suspect, to obtain compensation if they've been exonerated in court.
Now one of the things when you're looking at those types of issues and proving yourself innocent, we also have to realize that there are thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who are incarcerated who have said they were innocent and do not have the type of proof that will take them to that innocent road. And many of them spend their lifetimes trying to prove that they are innocent of the crimes that they were convicted of. Right now, it could be 2% to 10% or even higher, a higher number of people who are convicted. But when you look at that number, that percentage in relation to the total of the prison population in the US, because the US has the largest prison population in the world. When you look at that, and you're looking at thousands upon thousands of people who are incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. Now, granted, it is more difficult to get out of prison if you don't have a DNA sampling that they can test. But there are other ways, and we need to fight for those people who are incarcerated who haven't done any crimes, because there are so many of them.
Well, that's what we do. It's right.
Yes, that's what they do. They fight for those people and so many others. But we need to work on getting them out and getting other people out. So when we look at our task at, let's say, justice for the wrongfully incarcerated, and you look at the bill, and we're just talking about people who have been exonerated of their crimes, justice for the wrongfully incarcerated speaks to justice for all those people who are wrongfully incarcerated. The ones who get out, who can't prove their innocence, and the one who can. The hardest person, in my opinion, to prove they're innocent is someone who has been served their time, they're out of jail, and now they want to clear their name. It's very little help for that catchment of people who want to clear their name from a wrongful incarceration. So we have to look at the overarching piece. And when we look at prisons, we want to make a whole change to the whole prison industrial complex and make it so that when people come out of prison in general, all prison, that they have an opportunity to live their lives to the fullest and are better equipped to fit in our society. Because one thing that is certain is that when people come out of prison, whether they are innocent or guilty, they're going to go back to where they came, to their various communities. And if they don't have enhanced skills, enhanced education, and enhanced ways to cope with being out of their communities, then they are going to wreak havoc back on their communities. I really expect, just looking at the way this pandemic is rolling around that we're dealing with today, that soon there will be more people who are going into prison because there are more people who are out of work. There are more people who are hungry. There's going to be more homelessness. There's going to be more desperation. And our society is not geared to answer the needs of those types of people. But we and our communities where we are working in these grassroots ways, we have to do something to help people, to help them function and to do better in our communities. We have to stand up to the unjust and be able to move forward with that. Now, are there any more people with questions that they want to ask anybody? I'll just put a question out there so that the question can be answered. Is there some? Yes, I heard a voice.
There was a question from Grant Valentine. On the bill, does it address contributing factors to wrongful convictions as poverty, over-policing, implicit bias, racism, prosecutorial misconduct, bench bias, and poor defense lawyering?
This particular bill does not address that. We do need other bills and need to bring forth other bills that do address those particular topics. But this one is just basically saying, if you have been incarcerated, you have a right to be compensated for the time that you spent in jail. And we put a financial piece on that compensation, and we say that that's worth $1 million a year, you know? And because of the injury to your immediate children, we're saying that they also need to be compensated or helped in some way so that you can mend your family and bring your family back together. We're saying that you need housing, you need other types of services, you need education so that you can go and get educated and brought into the fold if this is something that you want to do, is get that education. We're saying if you need a job, there should be a way that you could go to the front of the line to get jobs so that you can help mend your life. This bill is talking about the fairness toward people who've been wrongfully incarcerated. And all we're saying is that if government makes a mistake, the police make a mistake, the courts make a mistake, and the wrong people are arrested, and put in jail and incarcerated for whatever the time is, they need to be made whole. That's what bill is saying. Let's make these people whole in some way. And the bill number again is, in the Senate, it's 2074A, and in the Assembly, it's 3978A. You can look the bills up and read them for yourself. They're on our website, Justice for the Wrongfully Incarcerated, and just see. Now, we are also a volunteer group at this moment, and we have other bills that we would like to push because we also are interested in people who have been wrongfully incarcerated and the people who put them in jail, the DAs and the police who put them in jail. We would like that to be an automatic revisiting of all of those cases that they have held to see if they have put other people in jail wrongfully. We feel that's only fair too, because we don't believe that you wake up one day and say, oh, wow, let me go out and put somebody in jail. We feel it's a pattern, and the pattern can be tracked through your history of working within this field. That should be done. We would also like to see those people who are doing these things, the prosecutors and the others, be punished in some way for the crimes that they've done. Now, there's a tremendous pushback against the punishment because right now they are cloaked within the cover of the law for various things that they do, as long as they feel that they moved in a just manner, even though injury was done. They're cloaked and they're covered within this law. And we want to uncloak them. We want them to be able to be punished for these crimes, because if there's no punishment, what's going to get them to stop? You and I pay these bills for their errors. We pay for this. And it doesn't seem as if we're paying for it because we are citizens within the framework of everything. But you're paying for this, if you get a welfare check, you're on public assistance, some of that money is going to pay for this. You're paying for this no matter what you do, you're paying. You're a part of this system. If you're rich, you pay. If you get a minimum income job, you pay. Part of your tax dollars is pay. And I know a lot of times they say poor people don't pay taxes. But when you go to the stores and you buy certain products, you get certain things, Pampers, whatever it is you're getting. They don't say, well, are you too poor to pay taxes? They say 8%, 9%, whatever the percentage is of your taxes. And part of that taxes go to pay these bills. So we're all paying for this injustice. And this bill is saying, look, we're tired of paying. You know, we want this to be set up, and then we want to come back and say, we're tired of paying, and we want somebody else to pay. We want those people who are committing these crimes to pay, because they're supposed to have been trained to do criminal justice activity. They're supposed to be trained to find people who are guilty. When my son, Yusef Salam, was arrested many years ago, and the other fellows were arrested and put in jail for these crimes, the person who actually committed the crime was allowed to go and commit other crimes while they were in jail. This person was known as the East Side rapist. He raped quite a few people. And he wasn't caught until he raped and murdered a pregnant woman on the East Side. So there's a price to pay for putting people in jail who should not be there because they're innocent. And that price is obvious that in Rhoda's case, he committed suicide because of the horrific experience. In Matias Reyes' case, the gentleman who went out and was known as the East Side rapist, he continued to rape and pillage other women in our community. So if you do the right person, the wrong person is not going to stop. They're just going to continue. Anybody else with more chats, more calls, more sayings, more stuff? Well, I do want to take this moment and just thank everyone who came out and shared this valuable information. And now for those people who are looking for help, you know, you can go to the Centurion Ministries, and you know that they're looking for people and they're taking cases who have been, murder cases that require a lot of work. Everybody has their own type of criteria for the types of cases that they take. But there is help out there within the various communities for people who are needing help and getting a resolution for their cases. You just have to stay firm and keep looking and hoping. And as we move forward to make changes and reform the whole prison industrial complex, to bring it to a point where those people who are wrongfully incarcerated, those people who are incarcerated also have the best chances that they can get to be all they can be. when I look at situations like those prisons in Norway and other European countries, they are examples of the types of systems that we need here. Because in those countries, you don't have people going to jail for murder and you're in there for life. You don't have children doing life. You're arrested at 14 and you do 30 years. You don't have that, does not exist. They train their people within those prisons to come back into their societies, and they try to make sure when they come back, they're coming back as whole as possible, so that those crime levels don't go back up. There's not a big reentry. We have something we call the, what is that bill? Where you could go back 3 strikes and you're out. And that just says that we want you back. We want our prisons full. Right now, there are private industries who run prisons, and they are suing states because their prisons are not full. Crime is down. There's no need to fill the prisons. We need to close some of the prisons that we have so that those people around us can live their lives without the terror of the police force within their communities. Now, once again, the bill number is 20-2074A and 3978A. You can find more information regarding it if you just go to our website and read the information. If you want to get more information regarding us and be a part of whatever we're trying to do and a part of these learning experiences. Many of you knew this information before, some of you didn't, but every bit helps. We're all in this together, and we got to keep pushing forward to make the change. Don't forget, sign up if you want more information. Anybody else has anything else they want to say? Yes, go right ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, thank the speakers for doing such an excellent job. You know,
Yes,
thank you
they
for
did.
coming and speaking. And I'd also like to thank Sharon for the years and years of work that you've done. Some of us have been following this, and, you've just made some tremendous progress over the years and have, stuck to it, during very, very hard times. So thank you very much for inviting us. And on behalf of the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow, we will support you and we're behind you.
Thank you so much. And let me just say this. I appreciate you thanking me, and I appreciate the ability to go on and do these things. But what I want to say is, it's not just me. It's all of us. I don't do this stuff by myself. I do it with a group of people. It's all of us coming together, trying to do and make change in a positive way.
Well, thank you very much.
Day by day. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Ellen Jaffe. Thank you so much. This is, really an issue that I have been very concerned about, and I will certainly go on and be a co-sponsor of that piece of legislation. I'll be doing that tomorrow.
Thank you.
What time will you be continuing? What time will you be continuing this conversation tomorrow?
Tomorrow we'll be continuing at 7 o'clock. We'll be on at 7.
Okay.
We're going to be continuing this conversation, and the last day for our conversation is going to be on the 19th. So you can join us every day. We'll have different speakers and be sharing different types of information. I know when you look at it, it might all seem the same, but if you're the one that's being arrested, if you're the one that's incarcerated, if you're the one who feels that you're innocent, if you're the one that feels you've been wronged in some way, it's real different to you. And it's interesting when I think of people who are incarcerated and stuff like that, and I say, wow, before this happened to my son, I never really paid incarceration any attention. I never gave it a second thought. I never thought anything about the people I saw on TV that you see arrested. But it's almost like when you get pregnant for the first time, and before that, you haven't seen any of those pregnant women. But the minute you get pregnant, you see pregnant women everywhere. Everything becomes real to you. And it became real to me when it knocked on my door and the doors of those other boys that were situated in the Central Park 5 case. And we're trying to make it real to quite a few people because a lot of people still don't see the reality of it. I had gone over to Con Ed at one point, and when I say this, I'm gonna call it an evening, but I had gone to Con Ed at one point, and I was speaking to a group there because they have a group of people that believe in volunteerism at Con Ed. That's the electric company here in the city. And they encourage their staff members to do volunteer work. And I was speaking to them regarding writing incarcerated children. And one of the men there told me that there was no such thing as an incarcerated child in the United States of America. And so I said, well, where do you think those kids go that you see on the TV? They go to jail. And the only reason why you believe that there's no such thing as an incarcerated child in a country where we have more children incarcerated than anywhere in the world is because we changed their name and we call them juveniles. And when we call them juveniles, it erases the fact that they are children, that they are 14, 15, 13, and some 11, and so forth, or even younger. It erases that fact, and it allows us as human beings to do and want to do whatever it is we want to do to them, because they're no longer children anymore. They're juveniles. That's one of the most dangerous words that has been put on our children in this society. Because when you call them juveniles, you remove their humanity and you turn them into animals that you can do anything to. So when I speak about kids who are incarcerated, I make sure I'm talking about the children who are incarcerated. And those children are people who can't vote. Those children, in some cases, can't buy a pack of cigarettes. They definitely can't go and buy a thing of liquor. And they can't do a number of things, but they can go to jail. And in some cases, they can go to jail and they can be in jail. At that time, they could be in jail with adults. And they can get sentences that keep them in jail for life. We have to change this system. And I'm thankful that all of you here on this call are a part of that change, and that we're going to be working together to change this system forever, for us, for everybody, so that people don't have to go through this over and over again. And thank you all for coming out. Nobody's in the chat room. I'm assuming that we have chatted out for the night. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. And I look forward to seeing you again on this road, because unfortunately, it's a long road, but I got some good shoes on. And when my shoes run out, I'm gonna walk it barefoot. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you. Don't forget,
Right.
join us tomorrow, 7 to 8.
I've been
Thank
there.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Now, how do we press? Oh, yes, I see it here. I figured it out. Good night. Now I'm going to press leave.
Good night.
Uh-oh, I pressed leave, but nothing happened. Okay, I'm going to try again. How are you doing, Rakiba?
I'm hanging in there. It was a rough day today, but we made it. I survived. I hope everybody else did as well.
Yes, we survived and we're here. We're alive. So
I'm
that's a
gonna
good thing.
try to share my son's update with my son.
Down. So
I
you're
am.
gonna be
I know.
sharing it with me.
Me too. I'm closer too.
Now we're going to be back on here tomorrow. Come on tomorrow. Come earlier so you can share your information to the group.
Okay.
Because he needs some calls for help. This is young men out in Pendleton prison. So we all know what's happening in the prisons. We all know it's overrun with COVID. We all know that it's so much going on, and we need to put pressure on these prisons to change their evil ways and to.
And I'm gonna give you a call. Listen, I'm gonna give you a call. The mail, oh God.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a call.
Call me.
Peace, everybody.
Peace, everybody. Good night.
Peace and night.
Okay. I'm